Welcome to more adventures of Bud Nupel with Part 2 of Telepathically Bankrupt. In our last installment, James had unexpectedly run into Bud Nupel after a 4-year absence. Bud appeared to be sick and asked James to take him to his home. On the way, Bud explained his early involvement in the Prestolog industry. He then revealed that his secrecy had been compromised and that the government had been aware of his travels these past 54 years. I unlocked the front door to my house and warned Bud to watch his head as my doorway was a bit low. We walked through the kitchen into the front room. Sliding glass doors led to a deck with a view overlooking Rainier Valley and the Metal Gold Milk Factory on Rainier Avenue. I'm glad to see you have a buck stove installed, Bud said, rubbing his hands together over the stove. I've always been a big fan of the buck stove, I said. I had that installed 15 years ago. Excellent, Bud declared. Do you have some more cellulose we can throw onto the fire? I stepped out the side door and brought in an armful of Presto logs. Bud opened the door on the stove, and I put a couple of fresh ones on the fire. This is just what I need to regain my energy, Bud told me as he stared at the fire. The glass window is a perfect touch. I need to stare at the fire for a while to get recharged. Bud smiled and looked up at me. Okay, I'll fix a pot of coffee, I said. Do you have any of that brown liquid you call whiskey? Bud asked me. Sure, I'm never without, I assured him. Could I have a shot of that with my coffee? Bud inquired, with a smile on his face. Bud must have stared at the fire for at least an hour without saying a word. We had both finished 2 cups of coffee with a whiskey chaser each. Outside, the street lights were glowing, and cars with headlights beaming raced back and forth on Rainier Avenue below. Bud appeared more solid and fortified when he at last spoke up. It's a terrible story, James. But I'll have to start at the beginning, or you'll never understand it. I should have realized my supplying Prestologs would attract unfavorable attention from the government, Bud explained. It's a double-edged sword. It gives me connections to powerful people, but brings unwanted attention from others. Bud stared at the fire deep in thought and went on. During a routine inspection and maintenance of my spaceship, I discovered my onboard computer had been infected with a Trojan horse. I sensed Bud was despondent over the discovery. It was very sophisticated. I knew it was there, but I didn't know what it was doing or how it got into my system, let alone how to remove it. Bud paused and asked for another refill of his whiskey. He drank it down in one swallow before continuing. One thing I did know was that it was up to no good. I had to assume my total operations had been compromised, Bud said. I had never seen Bud look so dejected. I worked night and day trying to penetrate the computer code that made up that Trojan horse, Bud said. I made little headway, but eventually I had gained some knowledge that I was able to use to my advantage. He was obviously happy and excited as he rubbed his hands over the buck stove. We need more cellulose for the fire, Bud said, opening the door. I threw another log on the fire, and Bud picked up where he left off. With the knowledge I had gained, and taking advantage of my connections with powerful and sympathetic people, I was able to penetrate the government's data storage bank. Bud paused again. I eventually discovered their operation and plans for your planet Earth, Bud said quietly, as if to make sure no one would overhear him. You see, James, he continued in a soft voice, they wanted all the cellulose on your planet for themselves. Why, they were even planning to actually use the rolls of toilet paper in a manner similar to your use on Earth, Bud exclaimed. My government has been dealing secretly with your bankers ever since 1932, Bud went on to explain. The reason your economy is heading toward bankruptcy and on the brink of collapse is because of this relationship. I was confused. Are you saying their plans have failed? I asked. No. Their plans are exactly on target. They are using their telepathic powers to manipulate the population. They want the economy to collapse. That will be their opportunity to take complete control of things. Bud sounded exasperated. I considered what he was telling me, but it seemed a little far-fetched. They use what you call marketing to control the masses, but it's blatant psychological manipulation, Bud explained. They are creating a fear-based psychology, setting things up for a future breakdown. And you're saying the bankers on Earth are in on this plan? I asked in disbelief. Think about it, James. Is it really that hard to believe? You think bankers have any scruples when it comes to making money? I realized Bud was probably right, but I didn't want to believe it. Yeah, you're probably right, I conceded. But no one else is going to believe our leaders are in cahoots with beings from another planet. Exactly and precisely, Bud said. They are banking on that. The government from my planet has been bribing your leaders with gold and technology secrets in exchange for large quantities of cellulose for decades. Bud paused briefly and then continued more intensely. And no one is the wiser. After all, conspiracies are regulated to the domain of crackpots and terrorists. Well, I don't have any problem believing that. It sounds like there's no hope for us then. Ah! Bud lifted his finger and pointed in the air. Perhaps not. Events are already in motion that cannot be stopped. But there are weaknesses. Greed is a ruthless master. Bud started to cough and was looking a little pale. Are you all right? No, not yet, Bud said in a shaky voice after he had stopped coughing. I have a virus, he said matter-of-factly. It couldn't be helped. It was the only way I could get rid of that Trojan horse in my computer, Bud informed me. I was able to create a computer virus that would destroy the Trojan horse. So I basically traded one virus for another. Bud covered his embarrassment with a smile. Because of the mental connection I must maintain with my spaceship, That virus has spread to me. But in doing it, it has been removed from my computer. He smiled as if to congratulate himself. But I needed to leave the ship in order to restore myself to health. Bud poured himself another shot of whiskey and knocked it down. Now, I just need to rid myself of it. And that is where your bug stove comes in. Of course, I thought. If I continue to take this brown medicine while absorbing the energy from the burning cellulose, I should effect a cure. Bud gulped down another shot of whiskey. I'll just sleep on your couch in front of the stove, if that's all right with you. Bud yawned and stretched out on the couch. The early morning sun streaked in the sliding glass doors as the sun peeked over the top of Mount Baker Hill. Bud woke up looking better than the day before. That was the best sleep I've had in a long time, he said as he put another Presto log on the fire. A few more nights of that treatment, and I should be good as new. I had a pot of coffee brewing in the kitchen as we both gazed at the sun rising above the hill across the valley. I poured a cup of coffee and handed it to Bud. He smiled and thanked me. "Thank you. You're a good host, James," he commented, and then cleared his throat. "Is there any more of that brown liquid you call whiskey?" I poured a double shot and handed it to Bud. He took a sip. Very nice, this Jack Daniels," he said, and then downed the rest of the whiskey. After he caught his breath, he said, "Oh, James, I took the liberty of notifying one of my acquaintances of my current situation." Just then, there was a knock at the door. To be continued.